The Liberal caucus retreat continues in beautiful Nanaimo, British Columbia. Now, some big news coming out of the retreat, but it's nothing to do with Justin Trudeau stepping aside as party leader or prime minister. To chat about this in more detail is political columnist with the Toronto Sun, Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from the Big Smoke. Now, Brian, former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney is being appointed to lead an advisory council on economic growth. Now, last time I checked, wasn't that Chrystia Freeland's job as finance minister?
It should be the finance minister's job. And here's the problem. We've had one of these before back in 2016. Justin Trudeau announced an economic advisory council on growth. It was headed up by Dominic Barton. You may remember that name. Dominic Barton was then the global managing partner for a consulting firm named McKinsey. He later went on to become our ambassador to China, but he was very close to the Trudeau government. Two things that jumped out at me when I looked at that old report. McKinsey was, or sorry, Dominic Barton was the guy and his group who recommended that we increase immigration on an annual basis of up to 450 to 500,000 people per year. He also said that it was too hard to get approval for temporary foreign workers. We should make that a lot easier. Those are just two of the disastrous policies that came out of the last advisory council from a global, pointy head that Trudeau appointed to tell them what to do. That's added to the housing crisis, the healthcare crisis, the immigration system falling apart. That was the last one. And so it wasn't very good for Canadians, but it turned out to be very good for McKinsey because right after that, hey, look, the government's contract with McKinsey just skyrocketed. Even the Auditor General's report said there were questions about whether bureaucrats followed the right path. So is that going to happen with Mark Carney? He's got a day job at Brookfield Asset Management. Brookfield, between the asset management division and another division, they're already one of the biggest vendors to the federal government. Are they going to see special favors? Carney's obviously got a lot of conflicts of interest. I've asked the Liberal Party about this because he's reporting to the Liberal Party, not the government. That means he doesn't have to follow the ethics rules, but will he be stepping aside from some of these roles? I doubt it. Brookfield paid him just shy of $1 million US last year in stock options. That's not his salary, that's his stock options. He's also on the board of the World Economic Forum. He's a United Nations Special Advisor on climate change and finance. He's on the board of Stripe, which is a major online payment firm in the United States. He's got so many. The Conservatives have just written a letter to the Ethics Commissioner saying, hey, wait a minute. This appears that it's breaking the spirit, if not the letter of the law. Is there anything that can be done about this? I doubt it, given the way they've structured his position.
You know, Brian, many critics of Mark Carney say he is a globalist, as you just mentioned, big supporter of the World Economic Forum and so forth, and he's simply not good for Canada. Do you think that's really fair criticism?
Well, calling him a globalist, a World Economic Forum, Davos elite, it depends on who is doing the talking and who's doing the listening. Some might think that's a compliment. Someone like Mark Carney would think that's a compliment. But there's going to be an awful lot of people who say, wait a minute, no, I don't want those guys to go to Davos every year running the show. And Mark Carney is a guy that goes to Davos all the time. You just go on onto YouTube, punch in Mark Carney, World Economic Forum. You're going to find video after video, and it's not from people in their basements trying to draw up a conspiracy theory. No, it's Carney and the World Economic Forum and everyone else promoting their videos about the need for a global regulation of how companies measure their emissions, or talking with Bill Gates about his latest idea. This guy, I've been saying this for the longest time, and now that he's appointed, we can talk about it more. This guy is the Conservatives' dream to run against. This guy, he worked for Goldman Sachs around the world, came back to the Bank of Canada for a little while, then he went to the Bank of England, then the United Nations, World Economic Forum board member since 2010, pals around with Bill Gates in developing global plans for saving the planet. This is the Conservatives' dream candidate to run against him. And now he's going to tell Justin Trudeau how to change his economic policy to win the next election. I think Andrew Scheer, the Conservative House Leader, was right. In many ways, Trudeau and Carney are the same person. And let me just tell you a quick story. There's a video being shared on social media, and it shows Carney. People are sharing it, saying, "Look, he's got low energy. Look at this guy. There's no charisma." That's not what caught my eye, Hal. What caught my eye was he's endorsing the socialist candidate for mayor in Ottawa. There was a liberal running, Mark Sutcliffe. Instead, he was endorsing Catherine McKenney, a longtime NDPer on the left wing of the NDP, absolutely a socialist. Okay, so if Mark Carney won't endorse the local liberal candidate for mayor, what makes you think he's not going to tell Justin Trudeau to bring about more socialist policies, which Canadians, quite frankly, are fed up with?
And apparently, there are a bunch of old video clips being circulated right now online showing Carney debating Pierre Poilievre over pipelines. Word is Carney may support foreign pipelines, Brian, but not Canadian ones?
Pierre Poilievre was asking Mark Carney, this is during the pandemic, it was a virtual meeting. Now, that's how you can always tell, right? Everybody's doing a committee meeting on Zoom. And Carney was acting as an informal advisor at that point to Justin Trudeau. And Poilievre was saying, do you support shutting down the Northern Gateway pipeline? And Carney said yes. And Poilievre called him a hypocrite because his firm, Brookfield, they are invested in pipelines around the world, in the Middle East, and I think in South America. So they're not opposed to pipelines. He's opposed to Canadian pipelines. Carney tried to dance around it and talk about a just transition, two very popular words in Alberta. He tried to say that, well, look, I understand. I was born and raised in Alberta. I know what I'm talking about. And Poilievre interrupted him and said, I was born and raised in Alberta as well, and this is not going to fly there. So, really interesting clip. I think this is going to cause an awful lot of headaches for Justin Trudeau. This is not going to help him. This is the opposite of what he needed to do.
Brian, there was allegedly a lot of discussion at the caucus retreat in BC if Justin Trudeau should maybe stay or go as leader. What are MPs saying right now? What's the inside scoop here?
Alexandra Mendez is a Montreal area MP, riding very close to Trudeau's. Party stalwart. She's not well known outside of Quebec, but party stalwart, well regarded in the Liberal Quebec caucus. She said that she has been hearing at the door that people will tell her, I don't have a problem with you. I don't have a problem with the Liberal government, but he has to go. She told reporters at the caucus meeting that, look, I still support him. I think he's done great things for Canada. Your mileage may vary, Hal, but she thinks he's done great things, but the voters just want him gone. Jamie Baptiste, who is a Nova Scotia Liberal MP, guy who's gotten into trouble for controversial remarks before he was elected, he described Trudeau as a three-time Super Bowl champion quarterback, and you don't bench those sort of people. So there's support for him, and then there are others who are sniping without putting their name on the record, saying they fear retribution. So a lot of people saying that Trudeau is a no-go. The one thing I haven't heard yet is there was talk that only about a third of the caucus wouldn't show. I don't think it's reached a third, but it'd be interesting to do a head count now that we're into the second day in terms of how many actually did show up. But of course, you just have to try and do that in the hallways because, reporters aren't allowed into the full room and people can arrive late, take different routes and so on. But, there was discussion that many Liberals just wouldn't go to this meeting.
It's interesting. Some people referring to him as a Super Bowl winning quarterback, while other people would argue, no, he's more like a kicker that kicked wide left on a team instead. Brian?
That's a good analogy.
Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are holding their own caucus retreat in La Belle Province in Montreal. Now, we're still digesting the news that Singh ripped up the coalition agreement with the Liberals. Was that all just for show, and the NDP will continue to vote with the Liberals to prop them up?
Well, I don't know if you saw the clip of Ontario Premier Doug Ford. There's speculation in Ontario that Ford may call an early election next spring. And so Ford was asked, what does this change mean for your plans? And if the federal government has an early election, Ford didn't talk about his own election at all. He just said, Jagmeet Singh's blowing smoke. He's just a greedy politician in it for his pension. He sounded like a guy people who rant on Facebook when I post about them. Uh, that's the sort of reaction that Ontario Premier Doug Ford had. We posted a clip of that, and people went wild, saying, "Yeah, this is exactly it." We talked last week. I pressed Jagmeet Singh 6 times to answer the simple question: do you have confidence in the Trudeau government? And he refused to say. He just announced that he had ripped up his supply and confidence agreement, the formal name of the coalition deal, but wouldn't say, yes, I have confidence in the government. No, I don't. Clearly, he doesn't, but he doesn't want to go to an early election yet. You've got British Columbia going to an election. They have an NDP government that's on the edge. They could win, they could lose. So they're going to the polls, I think, October 19th, around there. Saskatchewan, I think, a week later, also in October. The Saskatchewan NDP is hoping to form government. My read of the polls there, that's a bit of a pipe dream, but they have the opportunity to increase their seats for sure and weaken the Mo government. But the NDP is a party that relies on the same volunteers between the federal and provincial, much more than the Liberals or the Conservatives do. So Sain's under pressure. Don't bring them down, in October. So when Pierre Poilievre, whenever the House resumes, when he moves that motion of non-confidence, I wouldn't expect the NDP to vote for it. I think they'll find a way out, or Trudeau will be saved by some other means, promises to someone.
Albertans are pretty upset about the EV plant subsidies, Brian, while the oil and gas industry doesn't quite receive the same amount of love. Now, government that is dominated in Eastern Canada will stay in power due to a separatist movement in Quebec. Can you explain?
I saw Premier Danielle Smith just outraged over that, and I don't blame her. But yeah, Justin Trudeau and Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet are apparently going to be talking. What do you need? So yeah, the Trudeau Liberals could be bribing Blanchet with whatever he wants for Quebec in the months coming forward. Look, Stephen Harper did that to a degree during his minority. Sometimes he would offer things. Here's the difference. Stephen Harper wasn't attacking one side of the country, namely Alberta and Saskatchewan, while favoring Quebec. Stephen Harper tended to take a, you know what, I'll stay out of your jurisdiction approach. And so his moves to give Quebec, extra cash for a program that maybe other provinces wanted to coordinate with the feds, that was in keeping with what all kinds of governments have done. And it wasn't annoying other provinces. If you remember, there was pretty much peace in the land in terms of, yes, some people were angry at Stephen Harper, but separatist movements, whether it was in the West or in Quebec, were on the decline under Stephen Harper. They've come back under Justin Trudeau, and now he's going to encourage them by trying to strike a deal with Blanchet. But as I said, I don't see Singh being ready to go until much later. And if you buy into the pension angle, well, then that's going to be probably February before he'd be looking to bring down the government. So possibly an election in the spring after the budget. Then again, we could go all the way to October 2025.
Brian, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has been kind of quiet lately. Why do you think we're not hearing from him?
We're not hearing from him because he's up north. He's been touring Nunavut and Yukon and places where there's just not a lot of national media. And so you'll see the odd story. There was one out the other day, and I saw the headline, and it talked about Poilievre, announces a whole bunch of new policies. And I read the story. And no, that's what he's been saying at every rally. He just hasn't been up there. And so it's new to them. So yeah, that's what he's been doing the last little while. Kind of works for him, though. What's the old saying? When your enemy is hurting themselves, don't get in the way. And right now, Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, they're both hurting themselves. So stay out of the way. Let them keep doing that. The Conservatives are out at the retreat. Andrew Scheer, I think some others are monitoring the Liberal retreat. They continue to push on issues like the ethics letter over Mark Carney. And they continue to push on issues like the NDP candidate in the Montreal by-election campaigning with a Palestinian flag in his literature. I mean, that's absolutely insane how there's no Canadian flag on there. There's a little maple leaf next to the NDP symbol that's very tiny, but the main art on the front is a Palestinian flag, and the whole flyer is about what the NDP stands for in the Middle East, which is against where I think most Canadians are. So they're pushing on those issues, but leader-wise, he's up north, and it's probably good for them that he's out of the picture while Sain and Trudeau cause problems for themselves.
Political columnist for The Sun, Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.